So we've done a $1,000 snake budget. Now we're going to do a $1,000 lizard budget. So in the snake one, I built a snake rack in a previous video, and what we did was we housed the snakes in that snake rack. Now I can't be putting lizards in a snake rack because they need UVB and things like that, and that's very difficult to put in a rack. So we're going to be doing this with an enclosure setup. Now we're currently in production of building a quadplex, and the next real big build that I'm planning is a quadplex similar to that, but instead of it being vertical, I'm going to turn it on its side and go horizontal. And it will be made up of 4 enclosures like the quadplex is, but I want to change it up a little bit. If I tip the quadplex on its side, you see that we have 1, 2, 3, 4 enclosures all vertically oriented. So what I want to do is I'm going to keep the left and the right one vertically oriented. And then the 2 in the middle, I'm going to spin. I'm going to make them horizontally oriented. So we're going to have 2 vertical enclosures, 1 on each side, 2 horizontal enclosures in the middle. Now what that's going to do is that's going to allow us to get 2 arboreal lizards and 2 fossorial, I believe that's what it's called when they live on the ground. Now that does make it a little bit easier for us because $1,000 snake budget, we had 6 tubs filled with that, and we actually had 8 snakes in that snake rack, so that's one hell of a bargain. So what we're going to do here is we're only going to have 4 lizards to make up this quadplex. That will allow us to get more. These people won't leave me alone, and it's a bloody bank holiday here. Off. It's my mother. So let's roll these sleeves up before we start. Right, so now let's go over the size of the enclosure. The enclosure is going to be 8 feet wide, 4 feet tall. And we're going to divide that into 4. So that means that each enclosure is 2 foot wide, 2 foot deep, 4 feet high, being the 2 ones on the ends, and 2 feet deep, 2 feet high, and 4 feet wide for the 2 in the middle, which based on my calculations here on this lovely website, which is doing all the math for me, comes to 120 US gallons. So that's what we're looking for here. We're looking for 4 lizards that can live their entire lifespan within 120 gallon enclosures, 2 vertical, 2 horizontal. So without further ado, let us get started here. Now it's also American dollars again because 1,000 Canadian would buy me all. Chameleons sound like a good choice. For a vertical enclosure that's 2 foot by 2 foot by 4 foot, it would fit a lot of chameleons. The only problem is chameleons really don't do well in enclosures like that. They have very finicky care. They need a lot more airflow than this typical enclosure is going to allow. Now I could use fans like I have in a bunch of my other enclosures, similar to the one that's in Gizmos, which you're seeing here, but we're just causing a lot of complexity and the animal's still not going to probably do well. This is not really a chameleon friendly enclosure, so I'm just going to avoid that because I don't want the hassle down the line when it eventually causes problems and it needs to be housed into something else if we haven't taken it too far already. Bearded dragons. I don't really want to go into anything that obvious, so there's no bearded dragons allowed. I feel like that's the easy route, like the easy way out. So I want to do animals that are less known or a little bit less expected. Monitors. There aren't really any monitors I think that can really fit. Got bloody Gila monsters here. Of course, only in America can you have bloody Gila monsters. I don't even know if it's legal, but they're there. Goadin, I don't even know what that is, but it's expensive. No. Captive bred green peel, no. Me mouse is playing up again. Don't make me throw you at the wall, you wanker. I mean, that's a pretty cool looking animal right there. Legless lizard, but I've never seen one like that. I have a friend that has one, but it's a European glass lizard. Never seen one look like that. I mean, they're miles out of budget. It's $650, and that's probably per one. And they eat anoles, so that's a bit of a pain in the. We're not going to go down that route anyway. Seems like not a lot of it's being that useful. Let's organise this from lowest price first. That way we might not blow out our entire budget on the first lizard. Solomon Island tree dragon. Just looks like an iguana to me. I know nothing about them, so not going to happen. A lot of these painted agamas, which is a good option, but they're all wild caught, so we're not going down that route. Everything's going to be captive bred in this enclosure. Alright, I found our first lizard here. A green keeled lizard. Now, these guys get a bit of a name for being not the most handleable and a little bit nippy. But to be fair, a lot of arboreal lizards seem to not really like being touched. So that's just kind of what to expect with them. But they're beautiful little lizards. They don't get too big. We'd need to put it in one of the arboreal enclosures. $200 for a captive bred. Male or female doesn't really matter. I prefer to get a male because snakes, the females tend to be bigger. Lizards, the males tend to be bigger. So we're going to try and get everything to be a male for this. I should really have a name for the bloody enclosure, right? Getting a little bit tedious trying to beat around the bush on that one. We're going to call it the lizard quadplex. Alright, I'm happy with that. Not the most common animal people tend to have, so it is a little bit more unique. Now this this is more of a decorative animal, not the most handleable. You can handle them, but they're probably going to be more of a decorative thing. What I'm envisioning for this lizard quadplex is that both of the arboreal lizards are probably going to be bioactive enclosures with lizards in it that we don't really touch. They're more decorative. And then the two lizards in the middle, the two fossorial, if that is the right word, hopefully I'm not butchering that, they're going to be the more handleable lizards that we have. So when we have people come around, we can kind of show them, you know, the left and the right, these are our attractive animals. And then these two in the middle, these are the ones we can play with. Not play with, handle. So, green-keeled lizard, first resident of the quadplex. And the mouse is pissing me off again. Ooh, oh, that's wild caught. That right there is a beautiful looking lizard. I have no idea what it is. Northern forest dragon male, no idea what that is. You know what? I said that both the arboreal lizards are going to be more display animals. We're going to go with something that a lot of people don't have in the hobby, just simply because you don't want to be bitten by them. And I used to have one, so I'm an expert. We're going to go for a tokay gecko, because I don't learn from my mistakes. The two arboreal enclosures we're going to make bioactive, and we're going to use them as kind of display animals. A tokay gecko fits that bill perfectly, and a tokay gecko will do wonders in an enclosure like this. We could make it like a really greeny, lush kind of enclosure with the blue kind of coloration from a tokay gecko. That's going to be one of the most beautiful setups that we could have. It's also going to help the budget. Our only real requirement here is that we want it to be captive bred, because a lot of these tokay geckos are wild caught, and a wild caught tokay gecko just sounds like a pain in the ass in every such way. So we need a baby, not looking for any morphs or anything like that. Now we're going to get a male. They typically get a little bit bigger than the females, but not by much. Tokay geckos don't really have that much of a difference. And what we're going to do here, because I do learn from me f***ing mistakes, is we're going to have hides within the enclosure which are lockable. So if we ever need to get the tokay gecko out, we can without risking flesh. We want to keep the flesh where it belongs, on ourselves. So that is the second lizard of our lizard quadplex done. So we've got a tokay gecko, we'll put that in the left, and we've got a green-keeled lizard which we'll put in the right. And that gives us $260 currently. So that gives us a good chunk of change to get the last two lizards. Now, if you haven't watched the $1,000 snake budget video, in which case, why not, please? There are a few little extra rules. One, it's all American money, which I said at the beginning of the video. Two, I'm not taking into account any shipping. And I also have a bit of a buffer where I have to land 5% below the 1,000 or 5% above the 1,000. So I can't just fill up this quadplex with lizards that come to $500. I need to get the 1,000. Yes, it's a waste of money because I'm probably for the last two lizards just going to have to get morphs to increase that rate. But that's the limitations that I've set on myself. They are my imposed rules and I must follow them. You know what? We could maybe do a skink. The two horizontal enclosures we have, that's big enough for a lot of the smaller skinks because they're not the most active of lizards. And if you're wondering why they're not the most active of lizards, look at their little legs. Would you really want to be traveling very far with those? Probably not. So let's grab ourselves a skink here. Now the sandfish skink is actually quite an interesting skink. Quite a cool skink. We wouldn't need an enclosure this big for it. The biggest problem with these guys is that a lot of them are wild caught. I've seen quite a few of them at expos at this point. There's a lot of issues with buying wild caught animals. One, they tend to not last as long. They tend to bring in parasites and things that you don't want in your collection. They tend to be malnourished, dehydrated, just an absolute ton of problems medically. But what they also do, you're aiding and kind of funding the wild kind of catching of these animals, bringing them in from the wild. You're kind of helping that industry. We don't want to help that industry. Now that is where all these captive reptiles came from. So yes, you do have to get some from the wild to kind of start a breeding population within captivity, but we don't really want to be taking animals from the wild unnecessarily. I would reserve getting one of these until you see them captive bred. I mean, for that price, a $20 lizard, you can't imagine that's going to do very well. And also, if you think about it, they're selling this for $20. Who sold it to them and for how much? In order for that to be a productive business model, how many of them are you selling? They must be plucking these things out of the wild like crazy. We're not going to contribute towards those industries. So, f*** off. Emerald tree skinks, these things are becoming crazy popular recently, which is why I didn't go for them and I went for the green-keeled lizard instead. Crocodile skinks, no, we don't want an animal that's going to be permanently hiding. We've already got our two aesthetic looking enclosures. We could build a beautiful aesthetic looking enclosure for a crocodile skink, but the problem is that you're going to have to really enjoy the enclosure you set up because you're never going to see them and they also aren't very handleable. Fire skinks aren't the most handleable either. I mean, I think we all knew when I said I was going to get a skink where I was probably going to be going with that. So, blue tongue skink. That looks like a pretty good deal to me. $200 for a blue tongue skink. The males get a little bit bigger, I assume. I don't know by how much. Now, these are quite handleable animals as well. So these are animals that we can kind of interact with. So while we have our two beautiful enclosures set up with animals we don't really handle, This is one we can handle, we can interact with. So I think that's a pretty good option for us. Blue-tongued skink, that is the third resident of our lizard quadplex. So that leaves us with about $541 if we actually consider it to be $199. That's quite a big budget. Garter snakes we could buy multiple of to kind of fill our budget up because they are more of a communal animal. Lizards don't typically do that. Lizards aren't typically communal. There are a few, so we're not going to be able to do that. So we need to fill up the rest of our budget here with a lizard that's a little bit more on the pricey side, but is also handleable, but will still be living on its own. Tegu's way too big. So I found our last lizard here. We're going to get an ornate Euromastix, which is an absolutely bloody beautiful lizard. Beautiful lizard. Now, personally, I prefer the Egyptian Euromastix, but they get massive. An ornate Euromastix doesn't get as big as that. I mean, just look at the color on this guy. Absolutely bloody beautiful. And they're vegetarian, great for handling. So this is a perfect final lizard. Now, it's a tad bit over, but what the fuck was that noise? Now, it's a tad bit over budget. Let me see if we're still within our percentage here when we add that on. Ooh. The budget that we set in place gave us a 5% buffer above or below, which meant we could go anywhere from $950 to $1,050. By adding this ornate Euromastix into our budget, it brings us to $1,059, which is $9 above our 5% budget. But I'm going to say that it's bloody well close enough. Like, we're talking about increasing that budget buffer from 5% to like 6, not even 6. So I think we're good with that. We're going to get this ornate Euromastix lizard absolutely bloody beautiful. So we got our 4 lizards now. Our first lizard, our green-keeled lizard. Oh, like the snakes, we're going to name these buggers. So for the green-keeled lizards, the first thing that came to my mind was Apollo, the Greek god. No idea why. His name is now Apollo. The next lizard that we got was this little shit, the little tokay gecko. So we want to call him a tough name, but we don't want to call him a name that's going to make us scared of him. We're going to call him Leo, for multiple reasons here. He's kind of got spots like a leopard, so that's the portion of the Leo. And also Leonidas, the Spartan that was an absolute bloody menace. No, I'm going to keep the Greek theme going here, and we're going to call the blue-tongued skink Hephaestus, because he's known as being a bit of an odd-looking guy, and nobody's going to deny that blue-tongued skinks are a little odd-looking. So Hephaestus, or Heffy for short. So our final lizard to name here is the ornate Euromastix, which is the most beautiful of all these animals. Like, we cannot not call this lizard Aphrodite, but I feel bad calling a male lizard Aphrodite. We'll call it Afro for short, so nobody else is going to know apart from us. So there we have it. There is our $1,000 lizard budget collection. 4 epic lizards, 2 really good handleable ones, one that's medium handleable, and one that is absolutely off limits to be touched if you want to keep your skin. Now remember, people, this is a hypothetical. Don't be buying lizards in this manner. I'm just doing this manner to try and expose lizards that you maybe don't think of as owning as pets. Kind of expand your horizons a little bit.